Spinning,
We have
buffering.
record.
It says live. The counter is running. The title card is up.
Things are happening.
Things are happening. And
We
we're
are
off.
in the
We're
house.
live.
Hey.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Mack Flash Five, the show where we like to get together and list our top 5 movies fitting a certain topic. Now, obviously, there's been a couple changes to the show this week. Number one, Francois not here. We miss him, obviously, but he's got a paying gig doing hosting trivia in the bar. Bars are opening up, and he can get more bar trivia gigs. So he's out doing that, and he gave us the keys to the studio. So let's keep everything where we found them. Another change moving forward on our list is while we'll still be doing top 5, we'll still be listing 5 movies. We'll only actually be going into an in-depth conversation about 3 of those movies, and then saving the last 2 or 2 of them for honorable mentions. So you'll hear us do 3, 2 honorable mentions, and then number 1. And we're hoping that'll shorten the show a little bit, and maybe we can crank a couple of these out sooner, faster, and such.
I mean, I think the whole reason we did this was just so that our boxes could be bigger, and so people could see more of us.
More screen real estate. Now, the topic for today, I guess the official title is the top 5 kids movies that wouldn't fly today.
Yeah.
Now, that's probably going to be like a kind of a different definition for each of us as we go around. But Mike, you picked this topic, so tell us what that means to you, and then give us your number 3.
Sure, yeah. It's actually funny that you say that, because I was thinking about that, and like, this is probably our hardest one to name, I think, because when we were talking all about it, Andrew had a different view of it, and I had a different view of it. And in my head, it almost should be called, and to me, what were you thinking letting me watch that, Mom and Dad? Right? Something like that. But it means something different to everyone, because it depends on what you think is odd about these films, right? The way I'm interpreting it, though, is sort of twofold. One, something stuck with me in sort of a traumatic way from the film, or and why we titled it the way we did. Like, it's so weird or bizarre or odd for a kids movie that it probably wouldn't be allowed today, or you wouldn't see it happen. Although there are some weird ones out there today as well in a different way. But so that's why the title was so tricky. So I'll dive right into my first one. This is a little bit more of a softball compared to my number 2 and number 1. But this is a film that I've grown to love. Actually, most of mine are ones I love. But when I was younger, I did not want to have anything really to do with it. So this is a 1982 film by one of my favorites, Mr. Jim Henson, and I lean towards his Labyrinth, but I'm talking right now about Dark Crystal. So it's just my thing with Dark Crystal, and I'm sure most of the guys can attest to this, is it was touted as a kids film, and it came out before Labyrinth. Although I don't know how much, and I was younger when this came out, so I don't know how much traction it got before Labyrinth. But when I found out about Labyrinth and Jim Henson, this was a film I wanted to watch. I'm like, oh, Labyrinth, okay, these will be like the same. They're puppetry, and it's like magical, but this one is just, I mean, I guess the word dark is in the title. This one is just so much darker, and like the creatures. I'll pull one of them up right now. This is the Gartham, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This huge bug-like soldier that comes and attacks some of the cuter puppets, if you will. The creatures and the mythology in the movie was so sort of above me for what was a kids film, right? Like, it's such an in-depth story that Brian Froud came up with, and it's fantastic to watch, but some of the scenes are just, I'm still as an adult. I tried to show this to my daughter. Well, I did show this to my daughter. And I, as an adult, said to her ahead of time, you might want to close your eyes when this happens, because the scenes were so like ingrained in my head. So one of the ones I'm talking about, and this will be one that some of you will remember, is the Emperor,
right?
Xy's Emperor, when he's dying. The way Jim Henson does it, it's like it's almost like a time lapse, sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he just the bottom one is him on his deathbed, and he just crumbles and falls apart, and it's like you're watching his body decompose. And I was not mentally ready for that as a child, and even I watched this as an adult, and I go, why did I watch that? Right? And that is the number one reason why this is on my list. But I'll skip right to number 2, which they have actually done in the series now. They've done a series for this, right, on Netflix.
The younger version you have there is from the TV show, right?
Which one on top there?
On top, yeah.
Yeah. But that bottom one is from the movie, yeah. And I guess there's not much of him in the film, right? So it's kind of like in the prequel, since the series is the prequel. There's a good shot of him before he decomposes. But one of the things that I immediately said to my daughter, close your eyes on this, was this part of the film.
Oh my gosh, yes. That is the number one for sure.
Yeah, and the whole premise here, if you don't know, is that these Skeksis, big creatures like this guy, they want to live forever, and they figured out a way to do this, they think, which is draining the essence, which in and of itself, come on, in a kid's film, draining the essence out of these other creatures. So this little guy, this podling, is what they started draining. And you watch this happen, and you just watch their faces just sort of like suck in. And it's like a horror film. And I watched this, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was wondering if my daughter would be able to handle it. She turned away, so that was smart. She claimed to love the movie. We watched the series. It's not that it's not great. It's fantastic. But these little moments put this on my list because I still can't get them out of my head. You know, like, and I don't know that I necessarily had nightmares of them at the time, but boy, they made me go, I'll watch Labyrinth a few more times instead of watching Dark Crystal again when I was younger. So that's why those make my list. So I'll just I'll unshare that. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. But
well, for sure. But I love the Dark Crystal, and it never creeped me out at all because they were all puppets. Now in Labyrinth, you have some human characters, which kind of brings a little bit more realism into it. So it's just a little bit creepier. But the Dark Crystal never bothered me or my sister. In fact, when we would watch it, we would kind of time watching it with dinner. And then at one point, the Skeksis are all in the dining room and just eating. And we would just time dinner to that so we could eat with them. It was hilarious. We love that movie.
Even watching them eat, though, right? I mean, it's an attachment.
And all the things are alive still, and they're like grabbing them and eating them. Yeah, that kind of stuff terrifies me.
They're so gross. But I mean, that's a testament to Henson and the Creature Shop. Like, and I know what you're saying, puppetry, but for me, it was so real. Like, he does that stuff so well that it's extra creepy for me because it's not. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's bizarre. Like, I can watch David Bowie do goofy things, and even in like Labyrinth, the heads come off the guys and they toss them around, and that's silly. That's funny. Yeah. But this has that creepy undertone, where it's like there's nothing funny about Dark Crystal. You know what I mean? Like,
Labyrinth has David Bowie's codpiece, so there's that. That's scary in and of itself.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
No, that's the scary part in Labyrinth is David Bowie's codpiece in the tights.
Scott, have you seen either of these yet?
I haven't seen either. No, it's funny you say I'm not adding anything. I just know that I've heard Dark Crystal's messed up. That's like the reputation. As somebody who's never seen it. I had never seen a second, but I've heard all about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I said the world building's amazing. The prequel show is fantastic. Like, it's worth getting into. Yeah. And it's funny that I put this on my list of, things that couldn't get made today, and they made a prequel series. But it's like you know what you're getting into at that point. When I was younger, I did not know what I was getting into. But so there you go. There's my number 3.
That's your number 3. That's going to move up to me for my number 3. Now, my number 3 is one of those movies that really sticks in your mind. Especially design-wise, and even though it's an animated movie, it can still creep you out. My number 3, and I know you guys took it off your honorable mentions. We talked about it earlier. The Secret of NIMH.
Yeah,
nice. I'm glad I made it on there.
Made by the Don Bluth Studios, and his animated movies. Sometime like he's the one who did Land Before Time, Fievel movies.
Yes.
Help me, American Tail and Fievel Goes West, All Dogs Go to Heaven, and all of those kind of share the same tone with Secret of NIMH, but Secret of NIMH character designs and I guess set designs are really, really unsettling and gnarly looking. The cover is very misleading because these people look like they're
it looks like
almost
looks
like a Disney movie,
Disney
and it's
movie.
not.
Yeah, absolutely. When I looked up the Blu-ray cover, when I looked at the Blu-ray cover, I was like, man, that is so, like you said, that is so misleading. I'm like, that doesn't describe this movie at all. Like the rats alone, are like, oh my gosh,
that old wise like sorcerer rat is really creepy, and then there's the great owl, which is frightening as all hell. The story, I mean, all of these animals live on like a farmyard, and it's harvest time, so the farmer is gonna tractor over all of their homes and they have to move away, but she's got a sick kid and can't leave, so she has to go to the rats and they're going to help move her house. And at some point she has superpowers. At the very end of the movie, she kind of has superpowers and she lifts the house herself. I might have been in the kitchen cooking when they explained that. And there's V, what up?
Just got married.
Congrats, bud.
Oh no!
Oh, that's going online
to traumatize everyone now. Secret of NIMH, my number 3, because I have seen it more often. It's less. It's not. It didn't hold the creepiness for me. I've seen it multiple times. It didn't hold. It didn't really traumatize me that I couldn't watch it over and over again. So that's why it's lower on the list. Number 3. Secret of NIMH.
But it's funny because you mentioned those other ones and like American Tail and all of those had those like serious, like I watched just recently American Tail again, and it had been forever, and I'm like, wow, this is like a grown up story, and all of those ones by that production company, it's like these are they're kids movies, but man, there's so much more I don't know, subject matter. I guess nowadays like Pixar makes really deep movies, but they're still like fun. Like these other ones are like, you better grow up. What I mean?
Like All Dogs Go to Heaven is about a degenerate gambler who gets murdered, and it's a dog.
We'll hear about that later.
Oh, okay, great, perfect, excellent.
Wow.
Yeah,
awesome.
I know.
All right, so let's not interrupt that. We'll move on to AB then for his number 3.
Nice.
Okay, so pretty much all of mine are. I love all of mine except for number 1. I don't really love it. It's great, but I don't really love it. My number 3 is a Disney movie. It is a Disney movie from 1985. It is directed by Ted Berman and Richard Rich. It is The Black Cauldron. Up there. Black Cauldron came out in 1985. It is the first Disney movie to be rated PG. It is a story of Tehran who has to protect this pig and from the Horn King. Now, if you've ever seen this movie, the Horn King, because the Horn King is pretty terrifying, especially for a Disney movie. You watch Disney movie and you're used to Disney-esque stuff. This is like way off the top. Like this is based on a book, Chronicles of Peridian, and it's it kind of takes little pieces of the book and makes it into the movie. But the Corn King is trying to get this pig who's got like the prophecy, and so Tehran is trying to get the pig back from the Horn King. And there are scenes in here that are pretty much every scene with the Horn King is frightening as all hell. And I know that when this got released, it was a big hoopla back in 1985 over it because people were not ready for it. People were not ready for a PG-13 Disney movie. I think at the same year that this came out, the big animated movie was the Care Bears movie.
Yes, I was just
and so the Care Bears movie, everyone was like, that's why this movie didn't do well. This movie didn't do well in the box office because everyone flocked to the Care Bears movie, and we're like, this is what we want. We want Care Bears. And there's like the Black Cauldron came out, and it was like the black sheep, like, oh my gosh, like pure horror, like terror.
But who Now, who you remember more now, though, right? Black Cauldron or the Care Bears?
Oh man,
movie?
well, I mean, as a kid, this came out in 1985. I would have been 8, so I don't remember I don't know if I saw it at the time, but I would have saw it, 8 or when it was like 8 or 9, um, like I loved it. Obviously, like I've loved horror stuff since I was a little kid, right? And so like I love it. I couldn't get enough of it. So when this came out, this is my jam. There's no way I don't even know if I've seen the Care Bear movie or not, because I don't care about, like, I liked Care Bears. I like,
and that wasn't on your list.
I haven't seen a single movie mentioned today so far, so I'm like 0 for 5. Every movie you guys have talked about. So Care Bears or Cauldron.
But yeah, I liked the Care Bears when I was a kid, but Black Cauldron is my jam. Like this is more. I'm all in on the horror and on the dark stuff. So like Black Cauldron come out, I'm like, yeah, I'm all about this. So while everyone else is going to see Care Bears, I'm front and center for Black Cauldron. I love that stuff. So it's funny because post Black Cauldron, Disney, because it was a flop, they axed like a whole bunch of movies that would have come out. So I'm always curious as to like what other crazy movies they had lined up after Black Cauldron. Like what else would they have made? Like because if Black Cauldron had been a success, if it wasn't for those damn Care Bears, like we could have had all kinds of crazy stuff from the 80s, from Disney.
That's part of a series, right? So there certainly would have been a sequel to it.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it had done well, yeah.
I saw the Care Bears several times, Care Bear movies. I saw Black Cauldron once recently because we were studying for Disney trivia. So in the last year, that's the first time I saw Black Cauldron.
I also watched it for the Disney trivia, because I just wanted to rewatch it, and even now I was like, man, it's no wonder. Like I can't even believe this got the green light.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, what's your take then, Matt? Because like I love me some Black Cauldron. What was your take since you only saw it recently and you don't have a childhood memory of it?
I may have to watch it again because I watched it closely to study. I was taking notes. I was really trying to make sure I could pronounce and write the names correctly.
Sure.
Because they got like some Welsh-sounding names in that movie.
Yeah.
I'll check it out if it's on Disney Plus.
It absolutely is on Disney Plus.
Never mind. If you're gonna check it out, I won't say it because I was like, there's a scene, and Michael
you can spoil it.
Like it's with Gurgi. So the whole scene with Gurgi and the cauldron, and near the end, I was like, holy crap! Like that is crazy. And I mean, obviously resolves fine, but like, yeah, it's pretty traumatizing for a kid for sure. So yeah, my number 3, Black Cauldron.
Great. So we'll move on to Scott and his number 3.
We're gonna get to a movie I've finally seen. So it's so funny that you say kids' movies that wouldn't fly, because like I was a very bubblegum kid. Like I liked sugary, like flour, like stuff like this. Like I didn't dive deep into the dark stuff. So like a lot of those movies that were probably too scary, I avoided. So a lot of mine, you'll find my 3 and my honorable mentions are a little more mainstream. So I took this category to mean like movies that scared me the most as a kid, for different reasons. Simple enough. So my number 3 is going to be a massive hit, 1995's Jumanji.
Oh, great.
But it's not for the reasons that you think. It's not. And we're going to dive down an existential crisis I had as a child. You would see that movie and go, oh, wow, the animals are coming and the boy turns into a monkey, and that's so frightening. That's not what scared me. What scared me is the idea that Alan Parrish will get sucked in, and it's the scene, and it's when he gets sucked into the game, and then he comes back, and it's been 30 years, and he has a fight with his dad. And I had a cold relationship with my parents. I know. So then when he comes back, he runs straight to the cemetery, and they died. So then he never got the chance to make up with them or anything like that. So then the whole movie, I remember being a kid and just like, as the fun's happening and he's in the floor, I'm just like, he never got to say goodbye to his parents. That's so sad. And then as the rest of the movie goes, and then once he comes out, he goes to the party and hugs his dad. And I remember being like 6, 7 when I saw that movie in theaters, having like this existential crisis of what does life mean? What does this mean? What do the moments in life make for? Is the passage of time real? What exists? What doesn't? And I remember Jumanji seriously messed me up. Not for the animal stuff, but for the fact that he could get sucked into a game for 30 years. Everyone he knows is dead once he comes back, and that he had a second chance to do it. But he still had the memories of being away. It was like this weird existential crisis that I always think about, that how sad that movie actually is. So for no other reason other than that, Jumanji's my number 3. And it's a very lame compared to everyone else's, but I remember having I had a midlife crisis at 6 years old because Robin Williams came out an old man.
Well, it's one of those examples of like, I have a silly one, not nearly as deep as that, but it's one of those examples of where the thing in the film itself isn't that scary, but you believe, like, you think, what if this happened in real life? And I don't mean like a monster came off the screen, but you're like, oh, this could occur. I have a really goofy example of that. I think I've told you guys this before, and it was Gremlins, not really a kid's film, but I had it on tape, like taped off of like the movie network or something. And I used to keep it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand because, and all my other tapes were out and around on shelves. But I was terrified that I would spill water on it and then the Gremlins would come out of the tape. Like, it was like, it didn't make any sense. There was no logic to it at all. Like, worst thing that would have happened is I would have ruined the tape, but I can't get this cassette wet. I got to keep it in a drawer. And it's the same silly, non-logical, not nearly as deep as your crisis, but
when I was a little kid, I after watching Jaws, when I think I was like 7 or 8 when I watched Jaws, I refused to go in my neighbor's pool because I thought there were invisible sharks.
The biggest American
I was like,
thing,
I'm like, there's invisible sharks in my neighbor's pool.
And the logic,
the rewatchables was that they, like, the ocean and stuff was the biggest thing. People didn't do that.
Yeah.
But people were talking about pools and baths because of
bathtubs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
For me, it's just the idea of Jumanji. So I go back just like that. He would have, I remember being like, what if I fought with my parents and I didn't get the chance to do that? I didn't get the chance to make up. And you get that as an adult. But I remember being 7 and just being like, and then again, heartbreaking scene when he comes back and hugs his dad because it was all like not real, but he still had the memories that they were. So that's still like torturous. But again, just the idea. Jaws is a perfect example. It's not going to happen. But it makes you just question your reality. Well,
I know firsthand watching kids process like something and you trying to rationally explain it to them. It doesn't matter. You can't rationalize with a kid. If something is in your mind, that's the way it's going to be. Just, you have to just try and say, I'm there for you. I'm there for you if you need me, because they're just the crazy things, right? Jumanji isn't, I wasn't surprising to me. The reason is surprising, but a lot of people I've heard, like my niece, she's a lot older now. When she was younger, that movie gave her nightmares. Like, she did not want anything to do with Jumanji just because there was just the intensity of it.
There's like a lot of spiders and insects, right?
Yeah. So, and that's
nowadays,
not even so
nowadays kids have The Rock to protect them.
Yeah, that's what I said.
The Jumanji series.
It's true.
So there you go. Moving on, Mike. All right. So we're on to your number 2.
Yeah, let's stick somewhat with a theme here. This was not planned. And I love this man, but this is another Jim Henson film. This one's produced by Jim Henson. It wasn't directed by him. It's actually his last film that he was involved in before he passed away. And what's odd about this one, before I tell you what it is that I've seen many a film by this author. This author has written Matilda, and that was made into a great movie. Willy Wonka made into a great movie. James and the Giant Peach. This whole slew of films. This one, now the book itself is his creepiest book as well. This film times that by 100. I'm talking about The Witches, 1990, Angelica Houston. Terrifying. Now,
so I'm is this the one? I've never seen this, but I've heard. Is this the one? Do they take off?
I'll explain. I'll explain. Yeah. So Angelica Houston, in and of herself, for a child, the presence of her just playing a witch in general she's perfect for it. Terrifying as this witch, and acts her heart out in what is basically a goofy plot line. And I mean, for a kid's book, it's already frightening. She's the grand high witch, they call her. and in England and all around the world, there's these witches that their main goal in life, and this is the premise of this children's movie, is to get rid of all children. Like, the premise of this book and film is eradicating children off the planet, right? And so that in of itself, crazy storyline, right? So they come up with this Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, right? It's a misnomer. Oh, we're going to help the children. But they have it, they hole up in this old hotel, and they get together and they plan out the demise of children, which is by turning them into mice. Okay, so all of this is already terrifying. And then you add Jim Henson's effects. So let me just go to something like that.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that stuff, I've never seen the movie because I remember being like, not watching this.
Yeah, that is the least frightening of the makeup work. And this is one of the kids being turned into a mouse. So he doesn't stay like that for long. He does turn into a real mouse that runs around and talks. And it becomes there's a little bit of silliness to it. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? So you start getting into all the women in the room looking like this.
Wow.
Okay. And as you watch this too, I watched this just again today. And as you pan through the room, what they did was, I don't know if it was because they wanted to save on doing bald pieces, but you look through the room, half of them are men. If you look through it.
Yeah, that guy, I can spot that one right there.
And they're in dresses and it's very funny to comical to that's a guy. And then, so anyways, this is just when they take off their wigs and they kind of get comfortable and talk. But then when they really lock the door and they don't, there's no humans around and no one to hear their plans, then they start peeling their faces off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I remember. I've seen
and
that.
looking like that. Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
And the makeup is unbelievable. It's fantastic. But for a children's movie, it was, and if you can get past the moment where she pulls it off and then she starts talking and acting, they play it up a little bit and you can get over it. But it's that moment of nope, I'm done, I'm out, right? Because it's so shocking to see. I'm going to get off of that image because it's I don't want some kind of flashback. But the film in of itself, just a couple tidbits. I do enjoy the story. It's a very good story, but I want to just tell you a couple of pieces about this that were funny that I had heard when looking this up, and I had heard because I had read the book before. Roald Dahl worked closely on this film with Henson and the directors, and the director actually wanted to change the ending. So the very ending of the book, the boy, spoilers here, the boy's turned into a mouse, and at the end he stays a mouse, lives with his grandma, and he's happy. And that's the end of the story. And it was filmed a different way originally by the director. He actually has some good witch come in. It makes no sense at all. He turns the mouse back into a boy, and yay! It makes no sense. Roald Dahl hated that ending. Hated it. So Jim Henson, being Jim Henson, said, "Here's what we'll do. We'll film 2. We'll test it in some screenings, and we'll see what the audiences prefer." And of course, audiences being what they are, preferred the stupid ending where the kid gets turned back into a boy, and that's what gets done.
This is the kid shining.
Yeah.
This is literally the kid
and so
shining.
Roald Dahl, here's the thing. He cried at one of the endings, but he cried at the one where the boy stays a mouse because it was so beautiful and it's the way he wrote it. He refused to put his name on it when they used the other ending. And he was so angry, Henson had to sort of talk him down. So he eventually said, okay, fine, whatever. Because he was just adamantly against it. So that's one little funny story. But the other one that I think is hilarious, Rowan Atkinson is in this movie. And he plays the guy, the manager of the hotel.
Like the concierge or whatever.
Yeah, and he talks throughout the film. So actually, it's funny. My daughter peeked in and watched him talk. He can talk! And that's all I let her watch. And then I told her to go. And but when they filmed this film was sort of famous for 2 things. Angelica Houston hated the makeup. It was just torture filming in that for hours on end. And Rowan Atkinson took a nap in his hotel room, left his bath running, flooded the entire first floor of the hotel, and ruined all of the electrical production equipment.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? So, and then funny you say The Shining. Jack Nicholson was dating Angelica Houston while they were filming this, and he was notorious for sending her just bouquets and bouquets of flowers to the hotel that were all over the place. Isn't that weird? Thinking of The Shining.
Sorry, I find it really weird that you said like okay. First of all, I haven't seen this movie. This is one of the movies I haven't seen, which is crazy, right? It's crazy. I have not seen this movie. And here's another crazy thing about this movie. So you talked about the director. There is Nicholas Roeg. He is like a very profound director. Like a bunch of his movies are in the Criterion Collection. I've seen probably 5 or 6 of his movies from the Criterion Collection. Is Walkabout. There's Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie. There's Don't Look Now with Donald Sutherland, which is a big time like 70s horror movie. So when I looked it up while you're talking like the witches, I'm like, I didn't even know he directed that. So now I want to watch it even more. But like, it just seems weird that he would direct something like that, because most of his movies are very serious and like they're fantastical, but they're more on the serious side, more artsy fartsy kind of stuff. But then to hear that story about that he's fighting with Roald Dahl of the ending, I'm like, that seems weird, out of character for him, because like his movies have downer endings. Like Walkabout is it's a beautiful movie, but has a really down ending, and Don't Look Now is one of the most downer endings of all time.
Maybe because he thought it was a kid's film, like
could be.
But I look at it like a kid's early entry.
I wonder, do you sure this is the director that wanted that or the producers?
Henson was the executive producer on it. It was from what I've heard, mostly it was him, and Henson was sort of the gap between the two, right? I think really, I mean, it could have been a collective. Who knows? Really, right? It
just seems like a studio move to me to make it like kid friendly, right? But anyway,
but I mean, look at the effects. Like, I mean, you care about it now. You see her rip her face off, and you're like, well, we better make him back to a boy again.
Traumatize them enough. They got to give them the happy ending.
Yeah, but anyways, that's my number 2. Yeah,
man. So I guess I got something to watch tomorrow.
I got lots to watch.
Well, my number 2 is certainly one that all of us should have watched, I think, because it's a Marvel movie. Not just it's the first Marvel movie. Howard the Duck is my number 2.
That's funny. I have seen that. I saw it like 10 years ago.
I saw it in theater.
Now, is that a kids movie? Like, or how did they
now? But yeah, that's what I'm going to get into. It's probably not. I mean, it's if you saw it, maybe you think it's a kids movie because it's a walking, talking duck, right?
Sure. It was definitely marketed. It was 100% marketed for kids.
Well, I saw it probably earlier than I should have. I mean, at a very young age. Because for the first 2 acts, I really don't know what's going on. I understand he's a walking, talking duck, and then I guess he gets transported to Earth, has a crazy adventures or whatever. He gets to meet Leah Thompson. We all get to see Leah Thompson in her finest. At one point, they go to the museum, and Tim Robbins, of all people, tells them, gives him a little theory about where Howard comes from. And then later in the 3rd act of the movie, he shows back up with Jeffrey Jones? Principal Rooney from Ferris Bueller, right? And he gives us the origin of how Howard shows up. It's at that point they go to the lab, and it's at that point the movie takes a very dark turn, because they're going to talk about how you enter the lab and there's an explosion. And I don't think you get to see it, but then they go to the videotape. It's like, this is what happened. And alarms go off and people are like, shut it down. And then there's an explosion, and they go running through a hallway and they bump into Jeffrey Jones, who is transforming. Apparently, like, an alien presence is inside him now.
I remember that. Okay.
Yeah. And it was... And then for the rest of the movie, he's slowly becoming more and more like a monster. And
he's like a fly, kind of?
I think he does fly, and he gains like electrical powers. His goal is to get back to the lab, turn the machine back on, and then have the rest of his race of aliens invade Earth. Now, the end result of what these aliens look like is really cartoonish, kind of like Large Marge, Tim Burton anime type things, and kind of look funny. But that transformations kind of sequence throughout the 3rd act was really terrifying for me as a kid. It took me a little while before I saw it a second time. Howard the Duck, while it's funny in some cases and in other cases the worst movie of all time, there is a a horror element that, should not be seen by kids under a certain age for sure. Howard the Duck is my number 2.
Yeah, I don't think
yeah.
I've seen Howard the Duck.
Yeah,
That's
there he
wild.
is.
I don't think I've seen it all the way through. I remember it being on like the movie channel when when it was like after it was out, and me being like, that's kind of funny. Like it's a little duck guy, but I don't think I ever watched it through.
Mm.
But you're right in that transformations, they're the creepiest in any of these.
Yeah.
It's like that when it comes to that kind of kid movie makeup, weird, like, shocking change. Like you said, Large Margin, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, fantastic film. That one scene makes that movie horrific.
Yeah.
Just because that one scene, right? Like, so yeah, that's a good pick. Yeah.
All right, moving on to AB's number 2.
All right, so this is, again, like Howard the Duck. This can be argued whether this is a kid's movie or not. It was 100% marketed as a family film, and it definitely has a lot of family film elements. It revolves around a little kid. It goes on these adventures. It's very fantastical. I am talking about 1981, directed by Terry Gilliam, Time Bandits. So Time Bandits, I watched this a lot when I was a kid. It was always on TV. I watched it constantly, and it has a ton of fantasy. It's got he goes back to they go all through time. So basically, this little kid who's in England, these little dwarves bust through his wall at night, and he basically abduct him to go on these time adventures. And they have what's behind me here, which is the time map, and it basically holds the power to all these doors in time and space. And so if you find these doors, you can go to another place and time in all of the universe. And so basically this is like and so here's like where I think it applies to this topic is that so the story is about basically the dwarves are God's little helpers, and they have stolen the map to the universe from God, and are being chased by God, and also chased by basically like the devil kind of character, which is David Warner, who is insanely frightening in this, and also awesome. But he's trying to get the map so he can control the universe as well. But I'm like, I watched it not too long ago for this, and I'm like, no chance this gets made for adults now, based on just the whole like God and the devil and like the whole like religious aspects of it. But also like this is a family film, so like you're talking like the devil is coming to try and like get this kid, like abduct this kid, and at one point they have him and the dwarves all in this like cage suspended, and there's skeletons, and like they're in this like labyrinth. At one point they fight a minotaur, or like he goes back to like ancient Greece, and Sean Connery is the king, and he fights this giant minotaur guy. Like at one point they fight this like ogre guy on this pirate ship, and so they outsmart this ogre and like throw him overboard, and so all of a sudden like stuff starts happening, and the ship is actually this giant's hat, and he's wearing it as a hat, and he climbs out of the water and starts walking, and they're in this set, and they're like whoa, like running around this shit. It's Terry Gilliam, so Terry Gilliam, you know what you're getting into. It's pure insanity. But like this is a
kids movie.
Yeah, it's exactly. This is Terry Gilliam's kids movie. Like, who gave him the keys to making a kids film or a family film? Like only in the 80s, and it's like 1981. So like oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. But like, like I said, I've watched this a ton of times, but I hadn't seen it in a long time. And watching it recently, I was just like, man, like. 80s are an insane time when like a lot of crazy stuff got made, but most of it is not for kids. But this is, a family film, and it's insane. It's pure insanity.
Sounds confusing too. Like he.
Have you not seen Time Bandits, Mike?
No.
No, Scott. Have you seen Time Bandits?
No,
I haven't seen it either. And it's interesting.
None of you three have seen it.
And it's funny because like you described, it's It sounds confusing. You talk about Terry Gilliam, and then these people are being chased by God. All I can picture is the Monty Python God from Holy Grail, because that's a Terry Gilliam creation as well.
Yeah,
and
it's basically this light and voice, like come back, and it's like chasing them, right? But like so, not only that, like so here's all the people that are in this movie. So I mentioned Sean Connery. It's got John Cleese, Shelley Duvall, Catherine Hellmans, Ian Holm, Michael Palin, Peter Vaughn, and David Warner. So it's got like a laundry list of insane people in this movie, too. So it's like
just got his buddies. He got his buddies, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned Sean Connery fighting a Minotaur, which is hilarious because, like, I'm pretty sure Peter Jackson offered Sean Connery the Gandalf role, and he's like, I can't do this. I don't understand what's going on.
This is a man who did Zardos. I don't know if you've seen Zardos, but like
hot internet research theater on that. He turned down the Gandalf role because he couldn't make heads or tails of the script. It was a huge success. He said, "Get me the next adapted from a book sci-fi film," and they're like, "Here's the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen." Didn't even read the script, said, "I'll do it." Had the worst experience that hasn't acted since.
Right.
So he only took that movie because he passed on Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
It hurts.
Yeah. But anyway, honestly, definitely check it. It's Time Bandits is on the Criterion Collection. It is insanely good. Highly recommend it to you guys.
But not for children.
But not for children, right?
I saw it as a kid. I saw it a lot as a kid.
It doesn't
mean anything because I'm a weirdo, and clearly, like it had effects on me. But honestly, I think you guys would like it. It's super fun, and like and so too, especially you guys, the Star Wars guys, will enjoy name that dwarf and be like
all the Ewoks are there.
Kenny Baker is in there, and who plays Paplu?
Tony Cox.
Yes, Tony Cox is in there, but there's somebody else too. It's basically like it's Hollywood dwarves, right? Warwick Davis is not in there. I don't think.
People Avengers.
Yeah, but man, just for Kenny Baker alone, Kenny Baker is one of the main dwarf guys. So like you see him a lot. He talks a lot, and like it's so funny now. Like I didn't really clue in as a kid, right? Putting those two together, that Kenny Baker was R2. So when I was watching Time Bandits, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, that's R2D2. But then, like as I got older, right, as I probably like preteen, put two and two came together, and I was like, what? These guys are Ewoks in R2.
There's a human in there.
So anyway, yeah, number 2, Time Bandits.
Scott, let's see what you got.
So my number 2, like you said before, a little more mainstream. This is one. All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Love
my number
movie.
2.
Yeah, it's great.
So I'm trying to track back, and I feel like a movie came out in 1990. I would have been 3, and I feel like I remember seeing it in theaters. And if I didn't see it in theaters, I saw it at like a film fest or something like that. But I remember being in a seat and being frightened out of my mind with this movie, and to the point I haven't seen it since. I haven't had the want or need to. I went back and watched a lot of scenes, and I'm like, Jesus H. Christ, these scenes hold up on the frightening level. And you just look at the plot of the story, and being 3, and I've always been, again, going back to my childhood, existential child on death and time and what we have. This movie is literally about rewinding the clock on his death, and he gets kicked out of heaven. He's crossed. What a weird voice cast, first and foremost. Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise. Like, what a weird, like, voice cast.
Well, those guys are best friends.
Yeah.
No, but still, that it would get like Burt Reynolds doesn't scream kids film to me.
Wasn't Dom doing lots of voices back then though? Dom,
yeah.
He's in Secret of Nymph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird. So, and then he's killed. He's hit by a car. So immediately, that's sad at the idea of a dog being killed by a car. That's unto itself incredibly sad. He goes to heaven and he steals the thing. He gets kicked out of heaven, and they're like, "You can never return here. You're going to hell." The idea of hell comes into your mind. Am I going to hell? And if dogs go there, what happens? So then there's that. There's just frightening scenes all around. I remember the death scene being like seared in my. I remember the door flips or something, and then like. That's how they get him. Then when he goes to hell, there's monsters and all sorts of that stuff. And to the point where they had cut out scenes because it was so frightening. You can find them on YouTube now. And then
Really?
at the end, yeah, there's like one scene that tested horribly. So they've taken it out of all like DVD cuts and stuff like that. But I found that on YouTube, and it's very scary. But again, just for the subject nature, for the concept, being a young child, this is one I definitely saw in 90 or at least 91. And being like, well, never going to watch that again. And just the idea of death being a thing and heaven and hell and like, I don't know, again, just being crossed by friends and
Talk about a misnomer. All
Yeah.
dogs go to heaven. No, some go to hell.
no, he does. He makes up for it. But even at the end, it's incredibly sad. And it's the scene where she's sleeping and then the dog, he says goodbye. And just unto itself, that movie's traumatizingly sad that you have to cope with the loss. And I was very young when I started answering these questions, but again, my number 2, not that much to say. I haven't seen it in 30 years, but is All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Nice.
But I mean, obviously had an effect on you, and that's the whole point of this list.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah, for sure. Honorable mention. Time,
Honorable
man.
mentions. That's right. Mike, start us off.
Okay. So this one is weird because when my recollection of it, I had to find the title because I couldn't remember based on what it was because I thought it was a short film, but it's actually called The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
Mm-hmm.
And so
yeah.
I'm not going to talk about it because it's honorable mention, but it's not the Mr. Toad part. It's the Ichabod
No.
Crane Headless Horseman part.
100%.
Terrifying. Anyways.
100%, man. I was terrified / loved it to pieces.
Yeah. So that's
loved it.
So that's one of my honorable mentions, but I just had to kind of explain that. And then my other one, even though I love the film, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Judge Doom is terrifying.
Yeah.
Judge Doom is terrifying. Okay, there we go. That's it.
Let's see. On my list, I'm glad it's just going to be an honorable mention because there was a conversation in our thread about this movie between these two here and here. E.T. is an honorable mention for sure.
E.T. is a brutal film. Go on.
Stop. It's honorable mention.
And another one, I guess it's probably, I mean, maybe because of the characters, it certainly could be described as a movie for kids, but it's very scary for them. Gremlins.
Yeah.
Gremlins just missed was my number 6.
Sure. And that's one that I think some people got tricked on too, thinking, oh, this is cute. Look at that little guy. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, so my first honorable mention, and I've got the picture to put up for this, is Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah.
And my other one, hold on, I will bring that up. This hopped off the list at the last second because I felt like I wanted to talk about the other one more, but this is okay. From Banks and Rankin is The Last Unicorn.
Actually, yeah.
No, this is Bass and Rankin. Bass and
Is it
Rankin
really?
does Last
What a
Last
catch,
Unicorn
though.
is Bass and
Wow.
Rankin.
Oh,
I've
Yeah.
never heard of this movie.
No?
Oh man, it's great. Absolutely great.
No, I've never heard of that.
I mean,
So
it's a snapshot in time, I guess. Like that's early 80s, is it?
That is 1982, yeah.
Yeah.
So and like just not to talk about that one, but like it seemed like in the 70s and the late 70s and the 80s they started making these animated movies, and back then if it was animated it meant it was kids, right? All animation is all to do with kids. And so you're like anything that came out that was animated other than like say Fritz the cat was going to be marketed to kids, didn't matter what was in it. So you had all these movies that are very much more adult oriented things that because they're animated, be like, well, here's an animation. Let's throw it to the kids. We're like, I don't know. It's a good idea. So obviously a ton of ours are all animated movies or slightly animated. But that's the thing. Like when I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that's the studio. That's the studio. And you're like, but even the society back then was like, oh, animation means kids films. Like, see if it's animated, it's a cartoon, it's for kids.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's that way today too, but at least now the animated films are actually kids geared to kids and
Well, but I mean, there's tons of animated films now that are like there's just as many adult animated films.
Oh yeah, I guess you're thinking like on anime and all those types as well. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like even then, like I have a ton of not just anime, but like adult that are not like adult where they're meant for adults. They're definitely not meant for kids at all. So
yeah.
Scott, your honorable mentions.
So my 2-1 Casper. Always scared. That's how Casper died playing in a very death and existentialism. Who knew how Casper died playing out in the snow? That was my Jaws. I'm like, nope, staying in here.
Very creepy story.
Not getting hypothermia, and his uncles were so mean to him. Oh, it's horrifying. And then number 2, certainly not a kids film, but just caught me at that kid's age, and it was on TBS all the time. But it's Edward Scissorhands, and again, Edward Scissorhands is not a kid's film. Not a kid's film at all. I watched it a lot as a kid. I'm just saying that movie frightened the ever-living shit out of me. Vincent Price holding the hands. Yes. Oh my God, I'm creeped out. That scene where he's holding the hands, I was like 5. I'm like, so I'm just adding it just to be like, oh my frickin' God, because I wasn't throwing hard Fs then. But yeah, horrifying. Casper, Edward Scissorhands.
Great. So that brings us to our number 1s. Mike's going to kick us off.
All right.
And I can see the picture, but I knew what it was even before you sent it.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone who knows me knows that there's nothing is dethroning this film as this is the reason this list exists, this film. And I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. I'm going to hold you in a bit of suspense here. This is from
not us.
No, the other people. 1985. All of mine are in that range, right? That's sort of early to mid 80s kind of thing. This film holds a special place in my heart for 2 reasons. 1, it is terrifying, almost from top to bottom. 2, I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I watch it over and over and over. But 3, it's the weirdest sequel you'll ever see. It is Return to Oz. It is a sequel that Disney made to The Wizard of Oz that if you don't know anything about the stories by L. Frank Baum, it seems like it has nothing to do other than like some haphazard mentions of of the Emerald City and a couple characters, and Auntie M starts at the beginning but isn't anything like in the other film. It feels like they were like, yeah, that one was successful a long time ago. Let's make another one of those. Now, it is a mashup of 2 of his stories. The next 2 that he wrote, Wizard of Oz itself was just supposed to be a one-off book, but then successful. So he wrote a whole bunch more. And this is a mashup of The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. But where it falls apart is it's a mashup of 2 full stories that have their own antagonist in each film. Or in each book, I should say. So in the movie itself, nothing really makes sense. You have these 2 terrifying villains. One is like the Gnome King, who's like a rock guy, and he's like the walls that talk, and then he becomes a guy who's like sort of dressed like he's in rocks. And then there's this Princess Mumbia who can take her head off. So there's various things in this. I'm just going to scroll through some of these, but this is the first thing I want to talk about. If you didn't have anything else in this film, who has the idea to start a children's film out where you strap the main character down to a gurney and you're going to perform electroshock therapy on her? I don't know about you.
Well, not just a character, a beloved character. We're talking like Dorothy for Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, because this is
like
Dorothy.
We're not talking like just some girl that you don't even know.
She comes back telling stories of Oz.
Basically,
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So essentially, I guess I should have said that this is Dorothy returning 6 months later, talking all about Oz and the Scarecrow and her friends, and she just keeps talking about it. And it's 1899, and so they're like, she's insane. We've got a new thing called electricity. Let's zap her with it. And it's like that's the beginning of the film, and then that's what leads her into sort of you can start seeing where the characters, as an adult, having seen it, when you watch it again, you're like, oh, that's going to be this character because like all the inanimate things are the things that she sees later on, right?
Yeah.
And which is cool, but then you get this
Wheelies,
thing,
man.
Yeah, what is
Freaking wheelies.
It's a wheeler. It's terrifying, and they roll around. The thing is, the creepiest thing about these is that they really aren't scary at all. In that all they have is wheels, and like that's just like a helmet. You lift his head up; it's just a guy. So if you think about it as an adult, you could just push the guy over, and there's nothing you can do. But they're just the imagery, right? Frightening. But as I said, earlier on, I think the most frightening thing is this woman.
Yeah.
Princess Mumbi, who can take her head off. This is her wall of heads, something like 30 heads or something, that she took off of dancing girls out in the palace area. And you look, and their heads are removed, and she can take them off and put them on and change into their personalities.
Yeah.
Terrifying. And like, I just am like, why on earth you're going to take some things from his books and you're going to take these things and put them into this kid's film? Again, I'm still talking about it. I'm obsessed with it. So I guess it worked. But like, I don't know. Everything about it, like, the yellow brick road is destroyed. All the citizens are turned to stone. You don't even have the Lion, the Tin Man, or the Scarecrow more than a minute. You got some weird pumpkin-headed guy named Jack Pumpkinhead or something. It's just goofy, silly, bizarre, but talk about nightmare-inducing. So there's my number one, always will be.
That's
I knew that was coming.
Never seen it, but I've heard.
Oh my God.
It's great.
I've never seen it, but I will eventually, because it's not just a Wizard of Oz sequel. It's not just a Disney movie. It's a Steven Spielberg production as well.
And it showed the effects show the effects, because it's so terrifying, because like we've said, they put the money into the effects, and the effects look amazing.
Yeah, there's not really I wouldn't say those cheesy moments, right?
No,
You're right.
not at all. Like even like the Rock King there, he I mean, it's all like stop motion or like animated. It looks dated, but it still looks scary and awesome. Yeah. Even now, and that's like in the 80s, 85. So
there you go.
All right, my number one was number one as soon as you set this topic. I was like, I know exactly what it is.
Yours, AB? Mine was too. Was yours, AB?
Yeah.
Was everyone's number one locked?
No.
Okay.
Nope. Mine was locked.
This took me down a PTSD hole.
Right, mine was locked instantly. It was a movie I saw when I was 5 and hadn't seen again for 30 years. I bought it on Blu-ray. So it would be for this list, so I could review it for this list or whatever. And then I also needed it to, be complete a bit of a set. We've talked about it once already. It's for my Jim Henson shelf. The Witches is my number one.
Yeah.
It was number one instantly because of that scene. You showed pictures. The kid turning into a mouse, Angelica Houston pulling off her skin, and it's at that. She, aside from Angelica's monologue, the change of the mouse turning into a mouse is 15 seconds.
Yeah.
But the makeup and then cutting away and then new makeup and then cutting away and then new makeup. It's a lot like, you talk about how it's like the kids Shining. Was that what you referred to?
Well, yeah, because they changed the ending and
right. It's closer to the kids, An American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
For that transformation scene.
Rick Baker, I thought of I was like, this is more Rick Baker makeup effects than Henson. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
But yeah, I saw it when I was 5 or 6 because it came out in 1990. I'm 35 now. Honestly, I have not watched this movie in 30 years because of that one scene stuck in my head.
Look at that! I'm watching that tonight. I'm finding it and I'm watching tonight.
Number one is The Witches.
I will tell you, it's not on any of the streaming services.
It's a pricey Blu-ray too.
I had to watch 3 movies.
I had to watch it on my DVD that I had.
Right.
So.
It's a pricey Blu-ray because it's from the Warner Archive collection.
I can find it.
Yeah.
Okay.
AB, you're number one.
So when this topic came up, I started searching for kids movies because things didn't really affect me all that much as a kid, especially like kids movies. And so this was a movie I hadn't even thought about in years. I think I blocked it out of my mind. And so another movie triggered this movie. And so the movie that triggered this movie is from the exact same director, from the exact same company, written by the exact same author who wrote this book. And so the movie that triggered it was 1978 Watership Down. This movie is from 1982. It's called Plague Dogs by Martin, and is directed by Martin Rawson, who directed Watership Down too. So Watership Down, people talk about that movie, and it is crazy. Like for like again, an animated kids film, it is nuts. But this movie is that times 1,000. I just rewatched this movie, and so this just give you an idea what this movie is about. These two dogs here that are in this thing caption here. It starts off the movie, and they're in this government lab, and these two scientists are drowning that one dog in this pool, and they literally drown it. It is dead. They bring it out of the water and bring it back to life. And so that's how the movie starts. And so I'm like, right off that top, almost like, holy crap. Like, you just drowned a dog in an animated movie. The thing, like, and so then the two dogs escape, right? And the two dogs escape from the lab, and they're on the run. And so you can see behind me, if you go back to my regular screen here, kick me out of there. See these dudes here. So these are all the military that are basically hunting these two dogs over this landscape. And so the dogs are trying to like make their way across. So it's like really messed up, incredible journey, right?
Why
so
are they
like why are they hunting?
Yeah.
So I don't really want to give that away because it's a big deal. It's a really big deal in the movie. They really need to get these back. And so it's just to give you a kind of a hint. It's a government test lab. So they need to get these animals back. It's very important for them to get these animals back.
Those guys behind you look like they should be worrying about the Germans, not puppies.
Yes, right. These are military dudes. They're like crazy things. So the two dogs can talk. One of the dogs is voiced by John Hurt. Sorry, John Hurt. Yeah. And so one of the things that always triggered me about this, there's a sound clip that is in this movie that one of the bands I used to listen to, I still listen to, Skinny Puppy. One of their songs starts with the clip. And so every time I would hear that song, it like triggered me to this thing. And like literally every time I hear it, I'm just like, oh my gosh. It's like, it's the John Hurt dog. They're very skinny, right? Because they haven't eaten because they're on the run, and like the buzzards are going overhead, and he's like, "Make sure we're properly dead before you start to repeat." He's like screaming at the buzzards that are coming to pick their flesh off. I'm like, what? Like, again, like this is 1982. This is a movie that's like definitely has no kid in there ever has the business watching ever. Right. But like as an adult, this traumatizes me because it's like, A, I love dogs, and like B, like you're like this is above and beyond cruelty to animals. Like they're literally hunting them across the wilderness. And like they get into all kinds of I won't even go into the thing, but they get into all kinds of terrible situations.
Plus, we learned earlier that they don't all go to heaven, so who knows?
Who knows what happens to them if they get caught?
Oh, they do. Okay.
They have to like do a lot of crazy shit.
Listen. These dogs have already been through hell. They don't need like they don't need to go to hell. These dogs have been to hell.
Is that the tagline? Is that the tagline on the back of the DVD?
Yeah, these dogs need to go to heaven because they've already been to hell. Like, oh man. This whole episode. Thanks a lot, Mike. Like, brought me back and gave me these like I had to rewatch this thing and go through it all, the trauma all over again.
That's right. That's how you heal.
But what's that?
That's how you heal, right? I'm trying to heal us.
I guess.
I guess,
but like it again, as we're talking about this, it just like who greenlit this thing? Who thought this was a good idea? I like it's an amazing film, right? It's an amazing film. It's got a lot of great stuff going on in it, but like back then, like I said earlier, if you made an animated film, it was going to be, the studio was going to market it for kids. So they were making this film knowing that there's going to be marketed to kids, and it's like, oh man.
What year did that come out?
1982.
I've never heard of that either. There's a lot of movies I haven't heard about.
Oh, this is the.
Well-
I mean, you've heard of Watership Down, though, right? Watership Down with
yes,
the.
I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. It's a Watership Down's like a really big novel.
I thought
guy.
that was going to wind up on
Never-
somebody's list. That Watership
Yeah,
Down.
that one is a little more. I mean, that's the ones too. Like it's about a bunch of rabbits, and it kind of goes through the cycle of life, and some of them get eaten by owls and all that kind of stuff. And it is traumatizing, but it's like that's nature, right? You can like show it to kids and be like, you know, it sucks that these rabbits died, but that's what happens, right? But like, this isn't nature. This is like, these are men hunting dogs. And like,
it happens.
well, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's not part of the circle of life. This is not part of the circle of life.
Well, not that many soldiers. All right, Scott, what do you got for
All
number
right,
one?
yeah, Scott,
Okay,
tell
my
us
number
about a
one-
movie you have heard of.
And I've seen, and it was one. So I've already like conveyed an image of like being traumatized by my two movies. That's nothing compared to my number one. My number one, I actually had to be sat down by my parents and my grandmother because of how like frightened I didn't sleep. Oh, we'll get into that in a second. Screenshot from this movie.
Yes.
And it's 1991's Ernest Scared Stupid.
Yeah.
The
Love it.
essential-
I love
to
it.
the point when I said
Yeah.
to my mom, this was most traumatizing movies as a kid, my mom messaged me and said, Ernest Scared Stupid. And then we
Yeah.
talked about my fear. The whole movie itself is serious. I haven't seen the movie since 1991 or 2, and I can tell you exactly everything that happens. And that troll is so frightening. I had never seen witches, but that troll is so incredibly frightening. And he has the power to turn kids into wood. And I will never forget that. And again, I remember being so scared I would hide. I would hide behind my grandmother's couch chair. I wouldn't sleep. I would think I was going to be turned into wood. The scene when Ernest's dog gets turned into wood is so heartbreaking. I still think about that scene. Doesn't even hand it to him, and it's his dog. It's Wishbone. Or what's his dog's name? What's the dog's name?
Rimshot.
Rimshot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wishbone's the breeding dog. But oh my god! And I understand he says nice things to him and conveys and turns the movie, but. Just on the whole, that to the point that movie traumatized me from Jim Varney. I was scared of Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to School, everything else after. I thought he would pop up on screen and I would be so petrified of him. He goes to Africa in one of his movies. I wouldn't know. I was a ball of tears in any of his movies. I didn't watch the Santa one until like 2000. So I was so much later.
I got the collection if you want to borrow it.
Yeah. So no, Ernest Scared Stupid. I got nothing else really to add. just
Ernest
as
P.
far as the
Worrell is your Freddy Krueger.
That's the perfect way to put it. And Jim Varney, rest in peace, nice man by all accounts, frightening the ever living shit out of me. Did
you see Beverly Hillbillies?
Of course, I did see that. That was funny. I did see that. So, but as far as things go, man, my number one, AV. You can attest to this. Have you ever seen Ernest Scared Stupid?
Yes, I have.
Are you scared of that movie?
Not really.
Oh, it's shit on me as a kid, man.
No, okay.
Never let
So,
shit on me.
Scott, when you saw Toy Story 1 and you first
I
heard
was-
Stinky Dog talk,
I know. I guess. but
did you shake?
yeah,
like-
he's coming to get me. 1, 2, Jim Varney's coming for you. 3, 4. We lock the door.
That's a classic example, though, of what we were talking about, like what they did in those movies when we grew up in the 80s and in the early 90s. You've got this film that is a silly character, funny, and then just this one thing that just is like, oh.
And it's a comedic movie by all accounts.
Yeah.
I still remember bits of it, and he's bumbling through, and like, but just the fact of like, I didn't watch Troll or any of that stuff, but that was like my perfect age. I watched it, and he was a horrifying monster, and he turned kids and dogs into wood. And I had a dog, and I was a kid, and
I loved wood.
Yeah, and my parents. I remember my parents being at my grandmother's, and they were like, being like, "It's just a movie." That was probably the first time where they're like, "It's just a movie. It won't scare you." And then like having a conversation with me to try and like kick me out of it. But yeah, Ernest Scared Stupid was the lock of the century.
I like that as a last
Great.
choice.
That's amazing.
Well, that's going to do it for us, right? That was
Yeah.
the last
Sure.
number one.
Look
Well,
for the quiz
thanks,
later.
everybody.
Quiz will hit YouTube.
This
That's
will
right.
hit YouTube eventually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and
and then
then
the quiz.
a quickie
and-
after.
Yeah.
The quiz to follow. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to comment with your top 5
Come over here, Rick.
of kids movies that won't fly. Don't forget to like the video, share the video, subscribe the video. It really helps the channel if you do that. What up to thee again? And I guess that'll do it for us. This has been AB, Scott, Mack Flash Mike, myself, Matthew, saying goodbye.
Take it easy.
See you guys.